Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Creative Katie Karen Burchill. So today we are going to use something that you can get from the home reno store, drywall tape, in our art. So it's been a while since I've used a napkin in my art. And today I'm using this Danielle yellow coneflower napkin that I got from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There is a link in the description box below if you want to go check out some of the beautiful napkins that you can use in your art. So I put a coat of gesso on my 8.5 by 11 mixed media paper. Then, while that's drying, to maximize my time, I am going to cut out the part of the napkin that I want. Now, I just want this one quadrant, and I've played with the orientation. There's kind of two views. Now, to prepare it, I am pulling off the two excess plies. Now, in this case, they came off together. They don't always. Sometimes you have to remove one and then go back and remove another. If you put some water on your finger, that'll help the process, or even just a little bit of tape. So I am going to position these cone flowers on the page. And I'm thinking a little bit to the right, but I don't love exactly how it is on the napkin. So you don't have to use it. What you can do is cut out the parts that you don't want. And the best way I know how to do that is to use a liner brush with a little bit of water. I call this water cutting. And I'm just cutting off elements that I don't want. I am changing the composition of my focal image to something that's going to fit better, that I think looks better, that's in some way, shape, or form going to suit my purposes better. So you put the water on, let it sit for just a second or two, and then you can easily pull it off. It cuts it, and you get this deckled edge that disappears more readily into the background. So you don't really see the texture of the napkin. Now, this background is white, so if I had glued it down, it would basically disappear, but I still like to watercut it all the way around, close to the final image. Because I don't like the straight edges, that tends to show up and bothers me. So I go around and just do the water cutting at this stage. So to water cut, you need to take off those excess plies first to do it. So now that I have cut out some of the elements, I'm going to sit there and figure out exactly where I think I'm going to put the cone flowers. And I'm deciding, okay, I don't want this one here. But I'm keeping him intact because my thought process here is that I can move him somewhere else. I can rearrange the structure. So this little guy, I think I'm going to put on the left-hand side down low, but I don't need these other fronds there. So that could be a nice low coneflower. And then if I scooch this over a little bit, I can put this taller one up here. So I've moved it from the left side to the right side. So don't be afraid of taking what the napkin gives you and cutting it apart and making a composition that is uniquely your own. So now I've decided I'm moving the focal image, it's not going to the far right. I've left a little bit of space, so it's a little bit off center. And I find that for composition, that works best. So now I'm going to add texture with drywall tapes. And this is a huge roll of drywall tape. And it's been sitting on my desk for a while because I want to use it. So I decided I'm going to do it today. So I peel it off. It has an adhesive on it. And I'm just going to position that, kind of play with this, maybe more in the center. Now, this is going to add texture. It's going to add subtle pattern. And I must say that the end result with the drywall tape, I love the effect. So I think I'm going to leave the drywall tape out on my desk and utilize it a lot more. For ease, you can't beat it. And I decided that instead of just that middle strip, I'm going to take some little squares and rectangles of the drywall tape and spread it out across the background. This was definitely not the plan when I started, but I want to experiment with it. So instead of getting out a fine mesh stencil or stamp, I'm just using the drywall tape and I'm going to get that pattern and I'm going to get the texture with one easy application. In the States, I believe there's drywall tape that has circles, and for the life of me, I cannot access or find that in Canada. So I think when I do go to the States, I might be going to a home reno store specifically to buy that dotted drywall tape because I think I would use that a lot. Now, this drywall tape, it's easy to cut. You can cut it into any shape. I could cut them into circles and have textured circles. So as it sits on my desk, maybe I'll come up with more ways of using it. FYI, you can also use it as a stencil. You can put it on and stencil through it and you get that mesh pattern. Now I'm putting this mesh everywhere and it's going to be even underneath where the napkin is and you're going to see the effect of that. Now it does have an adhesive, but this is several years old, so I'm putting a coat of gesso on top. The gesso is preparing it to take ink or paint in a certain way, and it also is helping glue it down, make sure that it's fully adhered. So now I'm going to add a little bit more marks to my background. I grab the script stamp. I'm using just my black archival ink, adding a little bit of detail going over the mesh, under the mesh. I don't want anything too dominant in the background. I really want my focal image to shine through. So I'm happy with that. So I'm grabbing my unbleached titanium and my white gesso. That's me squirting it on the side. And I'm just applying a coat of this color on here. I'm not trying to get it perfectly even. I want to get some variation. I find that interesting and it's a very easy way of achieving that. I want some lighter and some darker areas. And this is also serving to push back that script stamp a little bit more, mute it out, so to speak. Just cutting off the excess here. I want to keep my background light because I want to glue that napkin down right onto the background. And I grabbed this Summer Meadow stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. It has this, what I'm going to call an echinacea, coneflower, daisy-like flower, and I'm just stenciling through it with the unbleached titanium. Some places show up a little bit more, some a little bit less. I just want that pattern or motif in the background in a subtle way. So I'm going tone on tone. And you can see on the stencil, I'm just using that one little motif out of the whole stencil. At this point, I grabbed a text stamp. It's a little smaller, and I'm just adding a little bit more interest to my background. While I don't want my background to overtake my focal image, I do want to make some interest there. Then I grab my white paint and I'm stenciling with that same motif with white. So again, it's very much tone on tone. And I'm trying to target the areas that are a little bit darker so that white shows up. This page in its entirety without, you know, um, editing and speeding up parts of it took around 30 minutes. And I like to give you that number because when I speed it up, it gives the full sense that this happens so quickly. So now I'm ready to glue down my focal image. And I have several parts. So I'm going, what's behind gets glued down first. Now, while I'm gluing this down, because there's the texture of the drywall tape, you have to be an extra little bit of careful because if you rub too hard, that napkin, when it gets wet, is just going to rip. So I'm putting a lot of fluid matte medium and then gluing it down. I had the top of the cone flower ripped. I'm just positioning it where it is. It's kind of got a divot in it, a part that disappeared, but I'm going to fix that later with paint. So I'm not too worried because again, I'm going to make this my own. Now, once I glued it down and there was that drywall tape underneath where the napkin is, that gave such a beautiful effect. It really made this look so much better than just if I had glued it onto a flat surface. Now I'm colorizing the cone flowers. Now you could have left them exactly as they were. They were bright enough, but I wanted to tweak the colors a little bit, add a little bit more of that burnt sienna, orangey color, and just make it again more of my own. So I'm putting on gesso, Naples yellow, cadmium yellow, and the burnt sienna. Just putting it on the brush and really not overthinking it. And I'm just filling it in. This makes it look painterly. It makes it look like I've painted it as opposed to just glued on a napkin. And it really, really bumps this up. And with that texture underneath, OMG, I was so happy with how this was coming together. It exceeded the picture in my head. And you love when that happens. So I'm just going from flower to flower, adding colors, changing the colors as I go. And at the end, I'm going to show you the napkin with the finished one, and you'll see the difference. It's the same, but different. I could have added quinacridone magenta and made it a more of a pinkish cone flower instead of the yellow. Whereas basically I'd be using the shape of the petals, but really changing the color. Right now, the echinaceas are blooming in my yard. I have 5 or 6 different varieties. So some are bigger, some are smaller, some are various shades of pink and orange and red, but I don't have any yellow ones. So I just go and I'm just following my instincts. I don't really have a set idea. I'm just adding color as I go. Then I'm darkening the seed heads of it. Again, I want to make the focal image stand out more. My background's very light and not very dominant, but if you had a bluer background or something with a little more stuff going on, you really want to deepen those colors and shade around the flowers, the focal image. So make sure that it stands out. And here I'm just adding a little bit of green. I've taken, I believe it's Hooker's green. I've added a little bit of Naples yellow into it. I've added a little bit of black into it just to get a more natural looking green, muted, and a match to what was already there. So now I believe I have that green and I am mixing it with water off to the side. And I apologize that it's not all on green. I'm mixing it with water, thinning it down, and I am going to splatter. I love using a fan brush, a looser fan brush, and I'm just getting a little bit of that green, a little bit of patterning into the background in a very subtle way. Then I do the same with the burnt sienna color. Once that's dry, I wanted to bring out the texture of the drywall tape in part. So I'm taking a combination of black brown and I'm just rubbing with a makeup sponge ever so lightly over top some, not all, of the drywall mesh. And you can see how it looks like I've stamped it on, but it's also texturized. I could have done this with any color, but I chose to keep it fairly neutral in the background. Now I'm ready to edge my page and I'm using my angle brush and black acrylic paint. This is just going to frame my art journal page. It kind of bleeds in a little bit, especially where there's the drywall tape. Loving that effect. I am so happy at this point in time. This page, like I said, turned out better than what I had in my head. I'm adding a few highlights, I mean shading on the petals of the echinacea just to add a little bit more interest and further make it my own. This just is making the focal image stand out a little bit more. Loving what has happened here. And I grabbed a sentiment. This came from my Courage sentiment pack. My digital sentiment packs are all available for purchase at NINNYSNAPKINS.com. And being digital, you can resize them to fit whatever substrate you're working on, and you can print them out however many times you want. So for the price point, you can't go wrong as opposed to stamped sentiments. Now, this is on white copy paper that I've printed it off. You can print it on tissue paper and then the tissue paper goes translucent and you just get the text. But for mostly my art journal pages, I leave it white and I do take the unbleached titanium and do a wash over top of the sentiment. And that just gets rid of that white. So it's not standing out against a very neutral beige ivory background. But when you do that, when you put a color on top, what you're also doing is dulling the text. So then I grabbed my Sakura glaze pen, black, and I'm just going over the letters. And this is making the letters black again, so they stand out. You could use your Posca pen if you have the fine line one. Um, or just leave it muted if that's the look that you want. Not always do you want the sentiment to stand out. I love this so much that I think this would be a great um, one to put on a canvas, turned into a home decor item. I'm adding a little bit of that Sakura glaze in the centers. It's shimmery. So there is the original napkin and my altered one. So they're the same, but different. So look at your napkins and switch them up, change them, make them your own, and create great art. And don't forget, take a trip to the home reno store and see what you could use in your art. Until next time, go get creative.